Because up until then, this was an ideological conflict. But when things escalated to a point where Muslims have to leave, now this has become a violent movement. When you accept the Prophet's mission, what's your new identity? Islam itself. Sure, you still belong to a tribe. Sure. But your loyalties now don't come from your affiliation to your tribe. Your actual loyalties come from La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now there's a new definition emerging in Arabia that didn't exist before. In fact, at Hudaybiyah, when some of the people came to negotiate with the Prophet ﷺ to not do Hajj, right? Some of the leaders of Taif came to meet the Prophet ﷺ, and they saw Salman al-Farisi is there, Suhaib al-Rumi is there, Bilal is there, right? Aus and Khazraj, both members of both tribes are there. Different families of Mecca are all sitting there, all sitting together, eating together, praying together. And he's thinking, am I at a bus station? Am I at an airport? People that have no connection to each other happen to be here. How can all these people that are from all different tribes be united together like this? This does not exist in Arabia. This hasn't existed for thousands of years. What is happening here? What was the new affiliation? Islam. So now, in the context of Islam, in the context of the seerah, Islam becomes the new identity. But let me go back. Does the concept of wala, loyalty and allyship, does that concept exist normally, or does that exist in a situation of conflict? That's the question. According to the pre-Islamic definition, when does that relationship kick in? When does it actually exist? Conflict. You cannot discuss wala without the existence of conflict. So when you look at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, there are levels of conflict. The entire seerah is multiple conflicts. The first conflict is ideological. The Prophet is presenting the message of one God and an afterlife, and that conflicts with the dominant narrative of multiple gods and no afterlife. He's presenting a narrative of orphans having rights, of women having rights, of not having what it would be wrong to bury a baby girl alive. This is creating a social, ideological, intellectual conflict, right? So people that don't align with you, they are on the other side of it. So before it's a military conflict, it's actually an ideological conflict. Then it escalates to the point where it's unsustainable and the Muslims now have to migrate. By the way, once they have to migrate, hasn't one side become violent? The moment violence comes in, what's the concept that kicks in? Wala. So what's interesting is, while we were in Mecca, Allah didn't talk about don't take them as wali. He didn't talk about that. Why not? Because up until then, this was an ideological conflict. But when things escalated to a point where Muslims have to leave, now this has become a violent movement. Once it becomes a violent movement, what do you find in the Madani Quran? Don't take them as wali. You understand the logic here? This is really important. Now, the Medinan establishment happens when we establish. By the way, you migrating, you lived in Mecca your whole life. Your father, your grandfather, your ancient ancestors are Meccan. Your definition of self is you're a Meccan at heart, and now you're being kicked out. When you're being kicked out, isn't it the case that they are revoking your citizenship? Isn't that the case? And when, in modern terms, when they revoke your citizenship, you no longer have any loyalties to the people who took your citizenship away. In fact, the only times where someone revokes if the government revokes your citizenship, they actually see you as an enemy. That's the only time they revoke your citizenship. So they've actually declared animosity first. They've taken the first step. The Prophet in Mecca was doing the same thing Nuh was doing, Salih, Shu'aib, all the other prophets. He was just preaching. He wasn't declaring a conflict. But when they came out and they pushed him out, now they have renounced their ties. So they don't even care about the tribal anymore. And on top of that, now Allah says, well, they've renounced, you will respond with renouncing also. You will take that step too. And that is the concept of al-bara, meaning renouncing, separating. Now, actually before I go there, when the Prophet gets to Medina, did the Medinan people before Islam, did they have a problem with Mecca? The people in Medina, did they ever have a problem with Mecca? No. They had some problems with each other, but they never had a problem with Mecca. Now that the Prophet comes here, the Meccans have a problem with anybody who supports these migrants. We kicked them out, we expelled them, and you gave them a home, we have a problem with you. And the Medinans, who don't have a problem with anybody, all of a sudden, so the Muslims of Medina are now being tested. In order to, their loyalty to the Prophet is being tested. So the Meccans were tested, are you so loyal to the Prophet that you're willing to let go of your citizenship and leave home? The people of Medina are being tested, are you so loyal to the Prophet that you're willing to go war against the people for no other reason that your Prophet is going to war with them? For no other reason. This is a loyalty test. And they passed that test. In Badr, they passed it. And by the way, some people didn't pass that test. What do we call them? They didn't pass it. The big issue with the munafiqun is that they don't accept Allah and His Messenger as their awliya. They don't accept the believers as their awliya. They accept the enemy still as awliya. Well, we don't have a problem with them. We were okay with them before. And so the Quran keeps saying, don't take them as awliya. Don't take them as awliya. Without this historical backdrop, you read these ayat, you think this is talking about your Jewish neighbor. This is talking about your Hindu friend. This is talking about the guy you work with. You see the problem with that? So we will talk about how it applies in our time. And before you get to the application, you first have to get to the correct understanding, the original understanding. Then we talk about the application. Hey guys, you just watched a small clip of me explaining the Quran in depth as part of the Deeper Look series. Studying the Quran in depth can seem like a really intimidating thing that's only meant for scholars. Our job at Bayyinah is to make deeper study of the Quran accessible and easy for all of you. So take us up on that challenge. Join us for this study, the Deeper Look of the Quran, for this surah and many other surahs on BayyinahTV.com under the Deeper Look section.